So happy Friday and welcome to the Soar Performance Group Revenue Leadership Webinar Series. So the purpose of this webinar series is really to channel and harness all of the experiences, all of the conversations that we as Soar Performance Group have with revenue-oriented leaders, both through our day-to-day work as well as the sales leadership communities that we've built, which are really local communities for chief revenue officers, chief sales officers, and other revenue-focused executives to build local connection and share best practices. So the topic for today is really a timely one, which is it's end of Q1, beginning of Q2. So regardless of what happened, whether you blew it out in Q1 or whether you had a tough Q1, what are some of the best practices that you can take and harness to make sure you have a great rest of year? So with this in mind, we went out and talked with many of our clients, many of our contacts through the sales leadership community to really get their perspective on what a great revenue leaders do coming out of Q1. Regardless of whether it goes great, whether you had a tough time, what are those core things that really elite leaders do differently than the core? And really one of the reasons that we decided to focus on this particular topic is Q2, if you're on a calendar year fiscal, is really one of the most critical selling quarters. And one of our customers put it best. He said, in our world, Q2 is really where we make our money because Q1, everyone's distracted. Sales kickoff meetings, there's incentive trips, there's beginning of year, everyone's back from the holidays. Q3 has summer vacation, or Q4 has the holidays and it's a sprint to the finish. Q2 is really the one quarter out of the year where everyone can be focused and dialed in for that 3-month period. And so based on that, we wanted to share what were some of the things we learned as we talked with other leaders, other revenue-oriented leaders on what do really elite revenue leaders do coming out of Q1. And there are four things that we found that were really, really critical. 4 things we found that were really, really critical. One is honestly assess what happened. So honestly assess what happened. Recognize past results don't necessarily predict future performance. Align with your leadership team and pull the right levers. And we were with a sales leader from the global leader in CRM solutions just last week. And one of the things he mentioned that he sees makes a huge difference in folks that do a great job coming out of a quarter versus those that maybe struggle is balancing the operational dynamics of, account review, opportunity review, pipeline review, deep dive in the operational details of the business with the emotional and the people dynamics, and striking that balance as you come out of the first quarter, regardless of however it went, is really, really critical for driving success in the rest of the year. So let's deep dive now and talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you can do if you had a great quarter. What are some of the key things to think about and consider if you had a great quarter? So if you think about that bucket of honest assessment, you had a great quarter. One of the things that is really critical to think about is, were we good or lucky? Did we have a great quarter because we did the right things, or did we have some things fall our way? And that can be tough because it's easy to feel great about the things we put in place, the ideas we had, the people, all those things. So honest assessment of really, were we good or lucky? Another key topic, which is one that we're just discussing with a sales leader yesterday, is our success evenly distributed? Meaning, as we look across our team, are we seeing that the success is pretty consistent? Or do we have a few stars that we're really relying on to make our number and some big gaps after that? Because one of the things you can have when you have a great quarter, if you have a couple stars you're really relying on, that can be a big, big issue. Or if you run a really large organization, do we have a couple product groups? Do we have a couple specific areas that are really outperforming and helping us make our number? So understanding, is our success evenly distributed across the team? Or did we have some overperformance in an area or another that really helped us to make or overachieve our number? A couple other things to think about in that bucket of honest assessment and really understanding where we are is, did we drive the right execution? So did we drive the right execution? Did we do the right things? And just as importantly, did we have the right strategy? One of the things that we see frequently with organizations is they tend to over-rotate on either strategic analysis or execution analysis, meaning they tend to think either very big picture about how the quarter went or get very into the details. And so really asking, did we have the right strategy going into the quarter? Did we take the right approach? And did we have the right execution? So understanding where did we drive the right number from, what helped us overachieve. Also important to think about are the people and the skills piece, because one of the things that is really important to consider as you're coming out of Q1 are what are the things that we need to do, who do we need to up level in the remaining 3 quarters of the year to make sure that we overachieve or exceed on our number. One of the other critical things, if you think about those 4 pillars we discussed earlier, is that past performance does not predict future results. And so coming out of Q1, something that's really important to think about if you're a revenue-oriented leader is it's great we had a first quarter, a really excellent first quarter. What are we going to do to make sure we have a great rest of the year? So number 1 is double down on what worked. So if there are things that are really working, as you go through that honest assessment, you say, hey, here are the things that we're seeing that are really working. Double down on those, really focus on those. On the flip side, one of the things that is a trap that we see many, many leaders fall into is have a great quarter, but ignore where the gaps are. So don't ignore those gaps, whether they be gaps in terms of pipeline coverage, gaps in terms of people and productivity on the team, gaps in terms of specific verticals or product areas that aren't performing well. So just because you had a great first quarter, one of the mistakes we see people often make is ignoring or not paying attention to where those gaps are that could show up as you get later in the year. Third key pillar is de-risk your year. So you've had a great first quarter. Really think about how can you de-risk the back half of the year. Deep dive on pipeline coverage, both the quantity and the quality, to make sure that that foundation you've built on in the first quarter is going to be really sustainable. Another best practice that we see for really top revenue leaders is focusing the QBR 1 quarter on the past, 3 quarters on the future. Because one of the things that we often see is QBR has become very much a backwards-looking approach, and really great leaders that we see do a good job of diving into what happened, but focusing a broader part of the discussion on forward-looking future view. Third pillar for having, going into Q2 if you've had a great quarter is really aligning with your leadership team. And I was in a meeting earlier this week with someone, and they talked about a top executive at Salesforce.com who had made his number year after year after year, actually blew his number out year after year after year, and got fired. And you would think about that and go, well, how could that happen? And the reality of it is he blew his number out, but he didn't do a great job aligning with his leadership and giving clarity on what happened, why it happened, why was he exceeding, why was he overachieving. And so as a result, even though he was performing really, really well, he wasn't managing those expectations, creating clarity around not just what happened, but why it happened, and having clear communication on the past and the future. And so if you are a CRO, VP of sales, director of sales, and you're coming out of Q1, you've really blown it out this quarter, making sure that you're really clear with your leadership team, managing those expectations, and showing kind of the pathway forward in a way that's really clear is something that we see that it's critical for success. And the fourth pillar that we see that's critical for success when you've had a great quarter is pull the right levers. And so in some cases, you've had a great quarter and you don't need to tweak too much. In some cases, you've had a great quarter, but maybe you have some big gaps and challenges coming in the back half of the year. So pull those right levers and think about it not only in terms of strategy, execution, people, skills. There may be specific gaps in terms of enablement you want to look at in the back 3 quarters of the year. But one of the other things which is equally critical is how do you manage the spirit and kind of the emotional component of the organization coming out of a great first quarter? Because one of the things that can happen is either organizations get too high and too excited and too complacent, or They feel like the bar is kind of continuously getting raised, and it can be defeating or deflating in a way. So one of the things that's critical when you come out of Q1 is think about those levers you can pull and make sure to balance the real hands-on sales execution oriented ones strategy, but also the spirit of your team and making sure that the emotions are really well harnessed. And this kind of the overall summary in terms of if you've had a great quarter. One of our clients, who's a VP and GM of an industrial manufacturing company, put it great. He said the best sales leaders are able to separate cause and effect, meaning just because you had a great quarter, does that mean you're delivering in the right way, and are you set up to deliver in the right way the rest of the year? So don't get complacent. Really understand not just how you did, but also what is it that drove the success, and make the right tweaks going forward. Now let's talk about the flip side, the less fun side, which is maybe you had a tough quarter. Maybe you had a tough Q1. So, it's interesting. I was talking about this very topic with an operating partner at a leading private equity investor. And so when I was speaking with him about this topic, one of the things that, and I thought he put this in a great way, when you have a bad quarter, the analysis can be grueling. Everyone wants to really deconstruct what happened, why did we miss, what were the things that went wrong, and there tends to be this period of very intense analysis. But you can't let that throw you off track. You can't let that, then derail your execution for the rest of the year. The other piece that he brought up that I thought was really important is there's a tendency to overcorrect. So when things don't go well, there's a tendency to over-rotate and overcorrect. And so the real key is, how do you find that balance? How do you find that balance, and how do you identify the right ways to close that gap and make your number for the rest of the year? The same 4 pillars coming out of Q1 apply whether you did great or whether you did poorly, but the flavor of them is a little bit different. So when you think about honest assessment, one of the things that at a macro level is important is there's a lot of analysis, as mentioned, when you have a miss in the quarter. It's important to have a good frame around where we missed, what happened that we didn't anticipate. Did we have a strategy issue? Did we have an execution issue? And where can we make up the gap in our year? So where can we make up the gap in our year, and how can we close the gap in our year? But having that honest assessment and having it from a few different lenses is really important. The other thing that is key is honest assessment in terms of, are we doing the right things, but maybe had some misfortune, bad luck, or some things happen that we didn't anticipate, or do we need to change the activities and the things we're doing? Key difference there. The other piece, when you think about past results don't necessarily predict future performance. One of the things that's key if you've had a bad quarter is understand that it's just one quarter. Avoid thrashing. So one of the things that we see in a lot of organizations is there's a bad quarter and all of a sudden there's thrashing. There's lots of change, there's wholesale overhaul. Avoid thrashing. Understand it's just one quarter. Make the right calls to get to the next place. Another key thing, don't undervalue what worked. There are things, just because you had a bad quarter doesn't mean that there aren't some good things happening. So don't undervalue what worked. Focus on activity. Obviously the result wasn't good, but focus on, did we drive the right activities? Did we work in the right direction? Did we drive the right quantity of activity? And are we driving the right quality of activity across the organization? Just like when you've done well, want to focus 1 quarter on the past, 3 quarters on the future in our QBRs, because the reality of it is we can't change what's happened. We have to learn from it, move to the future. When you think about aligning with leadership, this is a tough one, but a different flavor than when you have overperformed. When you've overperformed, it's really about managing expectations and explaining in a clear way where the overperformance came from. When you've underperformed, one of the key things that we see is no excuses. You have to take accountability, and that's a lot of times not fun. But just as important is clarity on what happened, why it happened, and an appropriate get well plan. So really great leaders that we see think at a detailed level about the get well plan, the where we go from here, and outline that in a way that their leadership can buy into. Then just like when you've really done well, it's all about pulling the right levers. The difference is when you have missed on the quarter, those levers are oftentimes corrective versus ensuring that we get to the place we need to get for the year. But pull the right levers with the understanding that it's important to pull the levers in the right direction and the right magnitude. So pull the levers in the right direction and the right magnitude. Overall message, if you've had a tough quarter, key is focus on where do you go from here and how do you make some changes to drive a successful rest of the year. So hopefully this gave you some good thoughts, some good perspectives on what to do coming out of Q1, some best practices around what elite sales leaders are doing to ensure they have a great rest of year. If you like what you heard, feel free to email me, jonthaxton@soarperformancegroup.com. Feel free to visit our website, follow us on LinkedIn, or join the sales leadership community, which is a community of revenue-oriented leaders in multiple cities across the U.S., coming to more soon. Most importantly, we wish you all a great start to Q2 and a lot of success in the coming weeks. Thanks very much for your time, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.